Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Zayin, Daf 97 of Masechta Pesachim. Yeah, can you guys even see me, Kilu? I think that thing in video parlance is called back glare or something. I don't know, what else should I do? So, Daf Tzadi Zayin, it's arguably complicated. The first part is, it's related to what we were talking about yesterday in terms of when you have a korban that you set aside for your korban pesach and it gets lost, so you set aside a different one and then you find the first one, that whole thing. It's in the context of a statement of Shmuel that we're gonna start off the daf with. The first part is just not so hard, but then it gets a little complicated, but I don't think it's unsurmountably complicated. We are on Daf Tzadi Zayin, Amud Aleph, 2, 4, 6 lines into the page. Amr Shmuel, says Shmuel, Kol shebechatas meisa, bepesach karev shlamim. Kol shebechatas roeh, bepesach nami roeh. That is the statement of Shmuel, which we will read again slowly. Says Shmuel, Kol shebechatas meisa. So any predicament by a korban chatas where the law would be that you have to kill it, and it doesn't seem very pleasant. Basically what you would do is you would put this animal in some area and just let it starve to death. Seems pretty chaval. Let's go weiter. So any situation where by korban chatas we would have to kill the korban, so the pesach karev shlamim, that same predicament when in the context of a korban pesach, what you would do is you would offer the animal as a korban shlamim. B'chol shebechatas roeh, and any situation by a korban chatas where we would say, okay, well, you gotta let it just graze until it gets a mum, and once it gets a mum, you sell it and take the money and buy a korban with that whole Indian. B'pesach nami roeh. So it will be the same outcome, the same halacha by a korban pesach, that it would graze until it gets a mum, same thing. So again, when it comes to korban chatas, anything that the halacha is mesa, so then by a korban pesach it is shlamim. Anything that by korban chatas it's roeh, it just grazes until it gets a mum, the same would apply to a korban pesach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, says Rabbi Yochanan, in a pesach karev shlamim ela shenimtza achar shchita, says Rabbi Yochanan that we're only going to offer a korban pesach as a shlamim, meaning, circling back to our case from yesterday, where you set aside an animal to be a korban pesach, it then gets lost, so then you set aside a second animal to be a replacement, and then you find the first animal. So, says Rabbi Yochanan, in a pesach karev shlamim ela shenimtza achar shchita. So if you found the original animal after you already slaughtered the replacement, so then the original you can offer as a korban shlamim. Avokodem shchita lo, but if you found the original before you slaughtered the replacement, well then the halacha is that the original one needs to graze until it gets a mum, and that is that. Maskeflo of Yosef asks the question, Uchlalu, is this really true? Is this really a rule? Right, part of what Shmuel said is that whenever you have a situation by a korban chatas that it would have to graze, so then the same would apply to a korban pesach, that it would have to graze. Now, what if you have a korban chatas that is more than a year old? I guess korban chatas has to be within a year. What happens if it's more than a year old? That the halacha is that if it is more than a year old, you gotta just let it graze until it gets a mum. Damar B'Shimon ben Lakish, Chatas shava shnasa ro'in osa kilu yomedes b'veis hakvaros v'roe. Let's read that again. The Rish Lakish says that chatas shava shnasa, that if you have a korban chatas that is more than a year old. We view it as though it's standing in a cemetery, i.e. a place where a Kohen would not be able to go there in order to slaughter it. Now, I don't know why the Kohen has to slaughter it. I thought anybody could slaughter it. But anyways, the point is that it's in an inaccessible, we view it as if it's inaccessible. And viroa, you just let it do its own thing, graze. If it gets a mum, you could sell it, that whole thing. And yet, what's the halacha if you have a korban pesach that is more than a year old? You offer it as a korban shlomim, as we learned in the brisa yesterday. Ditanya, we learned in the brisa kesev, that when it says in the context of a shlomim, it says im kesev, and it didn't have to say in kesev, because it was already kesev is a sheep. It was already talking about sheep anyways, so we didn't really need to write that. So when it says kesev, it's coming to include that the korban pesach, you put the aliyah, the fatty tail, as part of the emurin. Kshu omer im kesev, when it says the word im, so it's coming to include also a korban pesach that is more than a year old, as well as shlomim that come with the korban pesach that we learned, that Rashi said yesterday, was talking about the chagigas yudalid, l'chol mitzvah shlomim, for all the mitzvahs of shlomim, shetu'unim smicha, they have to lean on it, v'nesachim, and the libations, I assume that's talking about wine libations and also flour libations, I guess. Tinufas chazav v'shok, as well as having to wave around the breast and the thigh. Continues the brayzik shu omer, when the puzzle says im eiz, when the psukim then continue and then move on to talking about goats. Hifsika inyan, they make a break in the concept limed ala eiz shein ton aliyah, to teach that by goats you don't put the fatty tail. Okay, sounds good. Who could tell me what the question is? The question is that we just said that by a korban pesach, if it's more than a year old, you offer it as a korban shlamim. So while Shmuel seems to be making a general claim, which is that whenever the halacha by a korban chatas is that it should graze, so by a korban pesach it would also be that it should graze, and yet we have a situation by korban chatas where it grazes, i.e. if it's more than a year old, and the halacha, the equivalent halacha by, or I guess the equivalent example by korban pesach would be if it's more than a year old, and yet we don't say that it should graze. We say that you offer it as a korban shlamim. So, how do we understand Shmuel's rule when this would seem to go against it? So it says, the answer to the Gemara, Ki ka'amar Shmuel ba'avudin bidchuyin lo amar. Okay, sounds good to me. The Gemara answers that, well, there's a distinction to be made. There's avudin and there's dechuyin. What's what? Avudin is when the animal gets lost, just like we were talking about yesterday. We were talking about it today also. You have an animal, you set it aside to as a korban, it gets lost, so you set a replacement, you find the original, that whole thing. That's what's called avudin. You have the animal itself is a good animal, you set it aside to be a korban, you were going to offer it as a korban, it got lost. But then there's dechuyin. Now dechuyin means that the animal it isn't good anymore, right? It's too old. It's over a year old. So when Shmuel made his statement that whenever you have by a chatas mesa, by pesach it's shlamim, and by a chatas it's yireh, by pesach it's yireh, that was by avudin. He did not say that by dechuyin. And therefore, when an animal is more than a year old, or a korban chatas is more than a year old, or a korban pesach is more than a year old, when they are invalid because of that, that's what's called dechuyin, and Shmuel was not talking about that. Alright, sounds good to me. But one second. But does Shmuel's statement really hold up when it comes to avud, when it comes to when the animal is lost? Okay, what about when it's lost at the time that you set it aside according to the rabbis that it goes to Re'iyah? Let's see, what's this talking about? Ditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Hifish chataso, you set aside a korban chatas. Okay, Fine. You go to an animal, you say, you're going to be a korban chatas. Fine. V'avda, and it got lost. V'pishacheres tachtea. And then you set aside a different animal. And you say, alright, well, since my original animal that I set aside is lost, I'm going to bring this animal, the second animal, as a replacement. Okay. V'nimtzeis harishona, v'arishteen omdos. And then you find the original one. You haven't slaughtered the replacement yet, so now you have two animals. The first one that you set aside originally, and then got lost and now found. And the second animal that you set aside to be its replacement. What do you do? So Rebbe says, look, you offer one of them as your korban chatas, and the other one dies. Okay, fine, that's Rebbe's opinion. In chatas mesa, says Rabbanan, wait a second, Rebbe. We disagree. It depends. If the replacement was slaughtered, and then you found the original one, so then we agree that you would kill that the original one has to be mesa. However, but if the original animal was found before the replacement was slaughtered, roet. The opinion of the rabbis is that it would graze. So what are we saying, friends? We're saying that you have a situation by a korban chatas where you lost the original, you set aside a replacement, you found the original, the replacement has not yet been slaughtered, and we say that the original needs to go out and graze. So it's a situation of yireh. So based on Shmuel's rule, tell me what would the equivalent, what would we say in the equivalent situation by korban pesach? If by chatas it's yireh, by korban pesach it is also yireh. But that's not true. Ve'ilu b'pesach. However, when it comes to korban pesach, heichado avad v'nimtza acher chatzos. If you set aside a korban pesach, an animal to be your korban pesach, and then it got lost, and then you set aside a different animal as a replacement, and then you find the original animal after chatzos, kodem shchita, before you slaughtered the replacement, karev shlamim, it'll be offered as a shlamim. Do you remember? Now, of course, this is going like Reb Zera, right? Yesterday, we had a machlokes, right? That was basically our Mishnah. When you set aside a korban to be your korban pesach, it gets lost, you set aside a replacement, you find the original one. So the Mishnah had said, it depends. If you found the original one before the second one, the replacement was slaughtered, so then it grazes. If you found the original one after the replacement was slaughtered, so then it is offered as a korban shlamim. However, there was the other opinion that says that no, the differentiator or the cutoff is not whether or not the replacement has been slaughtered yet, it's whether or not it's chatzot. There was the opinion of Reb Zera, we also saw Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, we also see Zeo. Okay, let's leave it there. That actually the way it works is that if the Pesach that you set aside, the original one, got lost, you then set aside a replacement, and you find the original one after chatzos, so then it's offered as a korban shlamim, even though you haven't yet slaughtered the replacement. Since you found the original one after chatzos, it's offered as a shlamim, even though the replacement has not yet been slaughtered. So here we see a situation where if the same thing would happen by a korban chatas, i.e., you set aside an animal to be a korban chatas, it got lost, you set aside a different animal to be a korban chatas, you then find the original one before you slaughtered the replacement, so the chachamim are saying, yireh, it has to graze. And yet, when it comes to korban pesach, when you set aside a korban pesach, it gets lost. You set aside a replacement. You find the original one after chatzos, but before you slaughtered the replacement. And we're saying karev shlamim. So here we have a situation by a korban chatas, it's yireh, and by pesach, it's taka shlamim. It's not yireh. Ho ho. What do you guys have to say about that? So where are we? So v'ilu b'pesach echad avad, where an animal got lost, v'nimtza achar chatzos, and it's found after chatzos kodem shchita, but before you slaughtered the replacement, karev shlamim. It's taka going to be offered as a korban shlamim according to Reb Zera. And for whatever reason, the Gemara is assuming like Reb Zera right now. So the Gemara answers, well, Shmuel Karebi Svirle, Damar Avuda Lemisa Azla. Shmuel holds like Rebbe, who argues with the Chachamim. And he says that it doesn't matter when you found the chatas that got lost. It's going to be killed, it's not going to graze, it's not going to graze, it's going to be killed. And therefore, perfect. What was the first part of Shmuel's rule? First part of Shmuel's rule was that anything by a korban chatas that is mesa, by korban pesach, it's a shlamim. Perfect. Shmuel holds like Rebbe, and therefore the predicament, right, the halacha by this animal that got lost and then found is mesa. And we're saying that the same situation by a korban pesach is going to be a shlamim. Right, where are we? So, okay, but now we ask a question, but 1 second, it's not so clear cut. But 1 second, when it comes to Rebbe, every time that this animal gets lost and then found, the halacha is that it's going to die. Right? Whether it's before the shechita, after shechita, makes no difference. The halacha is mesa. And yet, Pesach, it depends. It's not so clear that necessarily by Pesach it's going to be a shlamim, because we said that chatzos is the cutoff. And therefore, it depends. If by Pesach the original one got lost and then it was found before chatzos, the halacha according to Reb Zera and Rabbi Eliezer is taka yireh, not shlamim. So the Gemara says kodem chatzos lav avud hu, but before chatzos is not really considered avud. It's not really considered lost, since it's not yet time for the korban pesach yet. Kedirava, like Rava, the Amar Rava aveda slayla lav shma aveda. That when an animal gets lost at night and then you set aside a different one, but then in the morning you see that the original one is there, it doesn't have the halachis of aveda, and therefore don't necessarily bring a proof from the fact that if it was found before chatzos, so then it wouldn't be brought as a shlamim. We're not really concerned, right? Shmuel was only talking about avuda, and before chatzos it's not considered avuda. Hakman ish kinchainik from before chatzos. All right, very good. Well, what do you guys think? Sounds okay, right? So Shmuel says like Rebbe, and therefore it's basically only talking about mesa by korban chatas. That's the halach is always mesa, and therefore by korban chatas it's mesa, by korban pesach it's shlamim. Okay, sounds good. But now frek the Gemara, so Rebbe says that basically when this animal gets lost, so no matter when you find it, whether it was before shechita, after shechita, it makes no difference, the halacha is always mesa. Well then what's the situation of yireh? According to Rebbe, after all, Shmuel had a two-part statement. Part number one was whenever by chatas it's mesa, by pesach it's shlamim. However, there's a part number two, which is whenever you have a situation by chatas that's yireh, so by pesach it's also yireh. According to Rebbe, what's yireh? When do you have grazing? Apparently it's always mesa. And for the Gemara, Kedra Boshaya. Damar Boshaya, Fishtei Chatos Lachrayas, Miskaper Bachas Men, Mishniya Tire. Oh. That Rebbe holds like Rebbe, the situation according to Rebbe where by chatas it would be yireh, is like Reb Oshaya. Let's read that again. The Amar Reb Oshaya says, Reb Oshaya, chatos lachrayis. If you set aside 2 chatos, one was going to be the backup. Meaning, you set aside 2 korbans, 2 animals, and you say, hey, one animal is going to be my korban chatas, and the second one is just going to be on hand in case the first one gets lost. So miskaber b'achas mein. So you offer one of them. What do you do with the second one? Vishniya tira. And the second one, you just let graze. So there you have it. According to Rebbe, that's the case by korban chatas, that you would have yireh. But one second. However, when it comes to a korban pesach, if you would do the same thing, set aside one korban as your korban pesach and the other one as a backup, so when you offer the first one, the second one, memela, is going to be Mosar Pesach. Mosar Pesach, of course, is Karev Shlomim. Is taka offered as a korban Shlomim. So you would have a situation where by chatas would be Yireh, but by Pesach would be Shlomim. Shmuel's principle is that whenever by chatas it's Yireh, by Pesach it's Yireh as well. So the Shmuel Reb Shimon Svirle. So rather, Shmuel actually holds like Reb Shimon. Damar Chomish Chatos Mesos, period. That Reb Shimon basically says that the halacha is always going to be Mesa. There's not actually ever going to be a situation of Yireh. And therefore, since every situation it's going to be Yireh, and we're saying that also by Korban Pesach it's going to be whoa. I said something wrong. I don't know where I said something wrong, but Reb Shimon says that every situation is going to be Mesa when it comes to chatas, and therefore, since by chatas everything is going to be Mesa, and we're saying that according to Shmuel by Korban Pesach everything's essentially going to be Shlomim, so there you have it. Everything by chatas is Mesa, and by Pesach it's Shlomim. Fine. Where are we? But one second. According to Reb Shimon, there's never a situation of Roeh then. It's always Mesa, it's never Roeh. Well, if that's the case, then if Shmuel is holding like Reb Shimon, well then how can he make his statement? His statement was that whenever it's Mesa by chatas, it's Shlomim by a Pesach. However, he also said that whenever it's Yireh by chatas, it's Yireh by Pesach. But if he holds like Reb Shimon, there's never actually Yireh by chatas. Shmona michad hakam kol shebechatas mesa b'Pesach karev Shlomim, period. So the Gemara says, yeah, actually Shmuel only said the first part. He only said kol shebechatas mesa b'Pesach karev Shlomim. He never said Kol shebechatas Yireh b'Pesach Yireh, because he holds like Reb Shimon, and there is no situation of Yireh by a korban chatas. Okay, fine. Zeu. So Reb Shimon only made the first statement. Kol shebechatas Mesa b'Pesach karev Shlomim zeu. Umay kamash malan. And what's he teaching us? Lafuke midu Reb Yochanan. It comes to the exclusion of Reb Yochanan. The Amar in a Pesach karev Shlomim. Reb Yochanan says that the only time when a korban pesach is going to be offered as a shlomim, meaning when it gets lost, that Rabbi Yochanan says that if you had a korban that you set aside as a korban pesach, and it got lost, and then you set aside a replacement, and then you found the original. So it says Rabbi Yochanan, if you find the original before the replacement was slaughtered, so then it's Yireh. If you find the original after the replacement was slaughtered, so then the halacha is that you can offer the original as a shlomim. Alma shrita kava. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan holds that what's kovea, what's significant, the cutoff is shrita. Baram that according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you find the original before Shrita, so then it's Yireh. And if you find the original after Shrita of the replacement, it's Shlomim. Kamashmalan chatos kava. And Shmuel is arguing on Rabbi Yochanan to say that no, it's actually about chatzos. And if the original is found after chatzos, even though the original one has not yet been slaughtered, it will still be offered as a shlamim. And therefore we could say that any situation by a chatas where it's mesa, also by a korban pesach, it's going to be offered as a shlamim. So now the Gemara goes back to the question that we had asked already a few minutes ago, which is that Shmuel had said that whenever it comes to a situation of yireh, right, originally Shmuel, right, when we were assuming that Shmuel was saying two things, so Shmuel had said that whenever it comes to a situation of yireh by a korban chatas, it would also be yireh by korban pesach. And we said, wait a second, but what about the fact, when it comes to korban chatas, if you set aside an animal to be a korban chatas, and it got lost, and then you set aside a replacement, and then you found the original one, and you had not yet slaughtered the replacement, the Chachamim say, yireh, that you let it graze until it gets a mum. Yet, according to Shmuel's principle, then the same thing would apply to korban pesach. However, if you have a korban pesach that you set aside, it got lost, you set aside a replacement, you find the korban pesach, the original one, after chatzos, but before the original one was, the replacement was slaughtered, it'll taka be offered as a shlamim. So here we have a situation, by chatas it's yireh, and by korban pesach it's shlamim. So that was the question that we asked about 10-15 minutes ago. So we had answered it by saying, well, Shmuel taka holds like Rebbe, that's how we wanted to say, and Rebbe says actually it would be mesa, so it would be a situation whereby korban chatas would be mesa, and by pesach it's a shlamim, which is perfect. Now, lishnachrina, the Gemara says you can answer it in an alternative way. V'ilu b'pesach, right, so you're going to repeat the question that when it comes to korban pesach, heichad avad, where the original one got lost, v'nimtza achar chatzos, and then it was found, and you had set aside a replacement, and then you had found the original one after chatzos, kodem shchita, before shchita, yikarev shlamim. It'll be offered as a shlamim, even though by a chatas, in the equivalent case, when you found the original one before the replacement was slaughtered, it would be yireh. So Shmuel Karabas Svirle. So you could say, instead of saying that Shmuel holds like Rebbe, that it would be mesa, you could taka say that Shmuel holds like Rabbah. What did Rabbah say? Rabbah said, taka, the cutoff is shchita. The Amar shchita kava. That shchita is koveya, and therefore, in this situation where you found the original one after chatzos, but before the replacement was slaughtered, so it would taka also be yireh, just like by the korban chatas. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Allah in a pesach karev shlamim. But 1 second, what did Rabbi Yochanan say? He said that when do you offer a korban pesach that got lost and was found as a shlamim? Elish nimtza achar shchita. If it's found after shchita, vakodem shchita. But if it was found before shchita, lo, then you wouldn't offer it as a shlamim. You would offer it as it would just be yireh. And we see that Shmuel taka argues on Rabbi Yochanan, right? Meaning, that was the opening act of the Gemara. We had Shmuel's opinion, and then we have Rabbi Yochanan's alternative opinion. So, if Rabbi Yochanan is pretty clear that the cutoff is shchita, so then Shmuel must be arguing. Alma shchita kava. So we see that according to Rabbi Yochanan, shchita is kovea. Michlad Shmuel savar chatzos kava, which means that Shmuel must hold like Reb Zera, which is that chatzos is the cutoff. In which case, when you find the korban pesach after chatzos, even though you haven't slaughtered the replacement, it would be offered as a shlamim. Even though by the Chacham would say that by a korban chatas it would be yireh. Ela Shmuel Rebbe Svirle, as we said earlier, Shmuel taka holds like Rebbe. Damar Avuda Lemisa Azla, who says that no, when it gets lost, you're gonna kill it anyways, and therefore it's a situation of by chatas mesa, by pesach it is shlamim. V'ha kol avudin l'Rebbe Mason, v'il b'pesach ichad avid kodem chatzos, v'nimtza kodem chatzos roeh. And just like we asked earlier, but according to Rebbe, every situation of a korban chatas that got lost and then it got found is going to be mesa. Yet, when it comes to korban pesach, if it was found before chatzos, according to Shmuel, wouldn't he say that it would be yireh and it wouldn't be shlamim? So kasavar kodem chatzos lav avuru, v'kasavar chatzos kava, and he says that look, if it was lost before chatzos, when it wasn't even yet the time, even midoraisa for shchitas korban pesach, that's not really considered avud, and it's not and Shmuel is not talking about that, and he holds that chatzos is kava, and once chatzos comes, then if you find it, and it would be offered as a shlamim. All right, so what do you guys think about daf tzadi zayin? It was like all right, right? Yeah, it was okay. So really, it was a pretty I don't even know how to say it, but like it was definitely technical, that's for sure. And it was around this opening statement of Shmuel, which is that any situation by a korban chatas that it's going to be mesa, so by korban pesach it's going to be offered as a shlamim, and whenever you have a situation by korban chatas that it's yireh, that it grazes until it gets a mum, by pesach also it's going to be the same halacha of yireh. And we asked all sorts of questions trying to understand Shmuel, because we have situations where by a korban chatas it's yireh, and by a pesach it would be offered as a shlamim. So the first way to say it was that we ultimately said, look, Shmuel holds like Reb Shimon, that actually by a chatas, the halacha is, by a chatas that gets lost, the halacha is always going to be that it's mesa. And therefore, by Pesach also, it's always going to be shlamim. And don't worry about the second part about yireh. Since he holds like Reb Shimon, there isn't actually ever a situation of yireh. Okay. Then we tried to entertain the notion that maybe Shmuel holds like Rabbah, that the cutoff is actually whether or not you did shchita or not, and therefore actually you could say that he would agree with the Chacham that the halacha would be yireh if it was found before the shchita. But then we said no, he can't, because he argues with Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore he must hold that the cutoff is chatzos. Ultimately, it seems like we're going to get back to the conclusion that Shmuel holds like Reb Shimon, and by chatas it's always mesa, and therefore, and by Pesach it's going to be offered as a shlamim, and that Shmuel's statement. Have a good Shabbos. Peace out.